The sound of shattered porcelain sliced through the cozy atmosphere of the Spring Breeze Cafe like a knife through silk. Jun Wo slowly lifted his gaze from the financial documents he had been studying while waiting for the fateful meeting with investors. His fingers froze over the page with the figures of a $200 million project, numbers that were supposed to change his life by 6 o'clock. Jun Wo had chosen this place deliberately. Spring Breeze was located in a quiet part of the city, far from the noise and bustle of business centers. It was a perfect place to discuss deal details without worrying about prying ears. Moreover, the cozy atmosphere encouraged confidential conversations, a quality highly valued in the world of big money. The 32-year-old CEO of the construction company Rising Dragon was no stranger to success. Over the past 5 years, he had turned a small firm inherited from his late uncle into one of the country's leading developers. His residential complexes were known for their quality and reliability, and the name Jun Wo had become synonymous with business success among the younger generation of entrepreneurs. But at this moment, his entire world focused on the source of an unexpected sound. The cafe owner, a stocky man in his 50s with a red, furious face and thinning hair, stood over the bent figure of a waitress. His voice boomed like a raging bull, echoing off the walls and forcing the other patrons to lift their heads from their cups. "You've ruined everything again," he roared. "Because of your clumsiness, we're losing customers. Get out of here immediately." The girl in a simple white blouse and black skirt, the standard uniform for establishments of this class, sank to her knees among the shards of a delicate porcelain cup. Her movements were cautious, almost timid, as if she feared causing herself even more harm. Her slender fingers trembled while collecting the sharp pieces from the floor, and her shoulders shook with barely suppressed sobs. Something about the scene struck Jun Wo painfully in the heart. Perhaps it was a memory of his own youth, working construction jobs to pay for university and knowing the sting of humiliation from superiors. Or perhaps it was just fatigue with a world where money and power allowed people to trample on others' dignity. He deliberately set the documents aside, smoothed the folds of his expensive Italian suit, and rose from his seat. His movements were measured and commanding, the kind accustomed to enforcing respect. In the world of big business, poise often mattered as much as the size of one's bank account. "I think we should talk privately," he said coldly, each word clear and weighty. The cafe owner spun around, ready to snap at the unwelcome intrusion, but upon seeing Jun Wo's elegant figure, the expensive Swiss watch on his wrist, and his confident demeanor, his expression immediately changed. In the small business world, one quickly learns to recognize those who can either help or harm. At that moment, the waitress slowly lifted her head. Time stopped. The sounds of the cafe faded into a distant, indistinct hum, the faces of the patrons blurred beyond recognition, and the entire world narrowed to two brown eyes looking at him with fear, pain, and recognition. Han So-yun. The name struck in his mind like thunder on a clear day. The girl who was supposed to become his wife 3 months ago. The daughter of the owner of the prestigious Golden Dragon restaurant chain. The woman he had loved more than his own life, who, according to official records, had drowned in the cold waters of the Han River on a dreadful March night. The girl whose funeral he had attended. Whose coffin he had helped carry with her relatives. On whose grave he had sworn never to love anyone else and to devote himself only to work. And now, she was kneeling before him amid the shards of broken dishes, in a cheap waitress uniform, with dirt-stained hands from work and trembling lips. The air in Jun Wo's lungs turned to molten lead. He realized he hadn't breathed for a good 10 seconds and forced himself to take a slow, deep breath. His heart pounded so loudly that it seemed the entire cafe could hear it. "I'm sorry," she whispered in a voice he would recognize among 1,000 others. "I'll clean it up right now." That same velvety voice, with a slight huskiness, that had read him poetry on cold winter evenings. The voice that had haunted his dreams every night for the past 3 months, turning sleep into torture. Slightly changed, quieter, more cautious, yet unmistakably hers. Jun Wo felt his knees tremble. The world around him swayed like a ship's deck in a storm. He grabbed the back of a chair to maintain balance and outward composure. Meanwhile, the cafe owner continued his tirade, oblivious to the drama unfolding before him. This clumsy girl is always breaking something. Yesterday she ruined an entire tray of plates, the day before, 3 glasses, and today an antique cup. I took her out of pity, and she only brings losses. She says she lost her memory after the accident, has no documents. Well, I felt sorry for her. Min Yuna. A false name. But why did So Yun need to hide under another identity? And most importantly, from whom? Jun Wo stepped cautiously closer, trying not to scare her. So Yun instinctively recoiled, clutching the shards to her chest. Small drops of blood appeared on her palm. She had cut herself on the sharp porcelain edges but seemed barely aware of the pain. "May I see your wound?" he said as gently as possible, fighting the urge to embrace her right there in front of everyone. "It needs to be treated." She slowly, almost entranced, extended her hand. The moment their skin touched, an electric jolt ran through Jun Wo. The same warm, silky skin, the same faint scent of jasmine perfume she had used since her student years. On her ring finger, there was no emerald engagement ring he had given her for her birthday last year. But on her wrist was a thin white scar, a mark from a silver bracelet engraved with their names, which she had vowed never to remove. Finally noticing the wealthy client's interest in his negligent employee, the cafe owner hurried to fetch a first aid kit from the back. Jun was silently treated the cut with antiseptic and carefully applied a bandage, trying not to show how his own hands trembled. Alone with So Yun for those few seconds while the owner rummaged through the kit, he leaned toward her and whispered so quietly that only she could hear, "Where have you been all these months?" She jerked her hand back, trying to pull away from his touch. "You're mistaken. I don't know what you're talking about." Han So Yun. He spoke her real name like a prayer, a spell capable of restoring a lost world. "There's a crescent-shaped mole on your left shoulder blade. A scar on your right thigh from falling off a bicycle when you were 7. You're still afraid of thunderstorms and hide under the blanket at the first rumbles of thunder. Your favorite ice cream is strawberry with chocolate chunks, and your favorite book is Scarlet Sails by Grin. Need more proof?" So Yun closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she looked at him again, her gaze no longer attempted to pretend. "Please," she whispered, a universe of pain in that word. "Don't. Where have you been?" He pressed. "Your funeral. Your father was crying over the coffin. I carried it with your uncles. We all thought we'd lost you forever." Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, leaving shiny trails, but she remained silent, lips pressed into a thin line. The owner returned with the first aid kit, and the magical moment of closeness was broken. But Jun Wo had already made up his mind. He unexpectedly addressed the man. "How much do you want for your cafe?" The man was taken aback. "What? But it's not for sale." $500,000. Cash. Today. The cafe owner's eyes widened to the size of saucers. His establishment was worth, at most, 100,000, and that only with a stretch. "Only one condition," Jun Wo added, writing out a check. "Min Yuna stays working here. Moreover, she becomes the manager. And you forget where you found her and what she told you. Forever." The deal was closed in 10 minutes. When they were left alone in the empty cafe, So Yun finally spoke, gazing out the window at the darkening street. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I love you. And I have loved you all these 3 months while thinking I was mourning your death." She slowly turned to face him. In the light of the desk lamps, her face seemed like marble, carved from grief and exhaustion. "That girl is gone, Jun Wo. Han So Yun died the night her car fell into the river. She really died. But you're alive. Only because my father killed me before the river could." The next day began with a pouring rain that drummed on the cafe roof, creating a melancholic melody. Jun Wo arrived early in the morning with a notary and a bundle of documents formalizing the purchase of the establishment. So Yun met him at the entrance. She had spent a sleepless night, and it showed in every line of fatigue on her face, every shadow under her eyes. "Last night I thought all night," she said once the formalities were done and the notary had left. "You deserve to know the truth. The whole truth." They sat at the same table where everything had begun the day before. Jun was sipped his coffee slowly, trying to appear calm, though inside he burned with impatience. So Yun remained silent for a long time, gathering her thoughts, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of a napkin. And then she began the story that turned Jun's blood to ice. 3 months ago, on that fateful March night when spring was just beginning to assert itself, So Yun was returning home after their romantic dinner at a restaurant. They had been discussing plans for the upcoming weekend, dreaming of a summer vacation in Europe, and So Yun was happy with that serene happiness only lovers know. But at home, a nightmare awaited. Her father was sitting in the living room with 3 unfamiliar men in expensive black suits. All of them had stern, hardened faces of people accustomed to violence, and cold eyes that reflected neither warmth nor sympathy. The air in the room was thick with tension and the acrid smoke of cigarettes. Han Song-ji, usually cheerful and sociable owner of a thriving restaurant chain, sat hunched over as if crushed by an unbearable weight. His face was drawn, and his hands trembled as he poured himself whiskey. "Sit down, daughter," he said in a trembling voice. "We need to have a serious talk." What he revealed turned So Yun's world upside down. It turned out the family business had been on the brink of collapse for over 6 months. The economic crisis, failed investments in new restaurants, competition with large chains, all of it had led to a catastrophic drop in income. But instead of admitting the problems and asking for help from his daughter or friends, So Yun's father began borrowing money from shadow creditors. At first, small amounts, tens of thousands of dollars at interest that seemed manageable. Then more. And more. By spring, the debt had reached the astronomical sum of $5 million, with interest growing every day like a malignant tumor. "These gentlemen represent our creditors," her father explained, nodding to the men. "They want their money. We have 2 weeks." "But where will we get $5 million?" whispered a stunned So Yun. One of the visitors, a tall man with a deep scar crossing his left face from temple to chin, slowly rose from his chair and approached her. His smile was predatory, full of promises of pain and humiliation. "We have a proposal, Miss Han. You are a very beautiful woman. Our boss is looking for a wife for his eldest son. Such a marriage would solve all your family's financial problems." So Yun felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. She knew exactly who they meant, the infamous Park family, controlling half of the city's underground business. Park Min-ho, heir to the criminal empire, was notorious for his cruelty, sadistic tendencies, and pathological hatred of women. Rumor had it that his previous 2 wives mysteriously ended their own lives within a year of marriage. "Never," So Yun said firmly, rising from her seat. "I would rather die than marry that monster." "Daughter," her father pleaded, "think carefully. It's the only way to save our family. Then they should kill us both. I will not be a bargaining chip in your dirty dealings." The men exchanged glances. The scarred man slowly approached So Yun's father and laid a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Han, you have exactly 3 days to straighten out your daughter. Or find $5 million another way. A third option does not exist. And remember, we know where you live, work, where your daughter studies. We know everything about you." When they left, leaving behind the smell of expensive tobacco and hidden threats, So Yun's father sank like a punctured balloon. The next 2 days were spent in frantic attempts to find a way out of the deadly trap. Han Song-ji called all his business contacts, but most had their own problems, and those willing to help lacked sufficient funds. Banks categorically refused loans without adequate collateral, and the family's entire property barely reached $1 million. So Yun considered telling Jun Wo everything. She knew his construction company had the necessary means and was confident in his willingness to help. But when she came to the Rising Dragon office, the secretary informed her that the CEO had flown to Tokyo for important negotiations with Japanese investors and would return only in a week. A week they did not have. On the third day, her father came to her with a plan that at first seemed completely insane. "We will stage your death." What? So Yun could not believe her ears. "You will disappear. Officially, you will die in a car accident. The Park family cannot marry their son to a dead bride, so they will be forced to find other ways to reclaim the debt. Meanwhile, you hide, and I try to negotiate with them for an installment plan or find the money." "Dad, this is madness. How can someone fake a death? It can be done if you know the right people." And he did. Dr. Park Chan-ho, a namesake, but not related to the crime boss, had been the chief pathologist at the city morgue for 20 years. In his student years, So Yun's father had saved his life, pulling him out from under the wheels of a drunk driver, and since then, the doctor considered himself eternally indebted. That night, the morgue received the body of a young woman roughly the same age and build as So Yun. She had died in a horrific accident on a country road. Her car collided at high speed with a barrier and caught fire. The victim's face was unrecognizable, and the documents burned along with the car interior. "We will swap the identities," her father explained his monstrous plan. "You drive your car to the Han River Bridge and leave it there running. I'll pick you up in another car. In the morning, your body will be found in the water." "What about fingerprints? DNA analysis?" she asked. "The car will explode and burn. I'll install a homemade incendiary device. Fire and water will destroy the genetic material so thoroughly that testing will be impossible. As for the fingerprints," he handed his daughter a small vial of acid. "You'll need to apply a little to the tips of the deceased girl's fingers. Just enough to erase the patterns." So Yun shuddered in horror. "Dad, we're becoming criminals. We're desecrating the memory of an innocent girl. We're saving your life. And she's already dead, it doesn't matter to her." And So Yun agreed. Because the alternative was marrying a monster or both of them dying. That terrible night went according to plan with devilish precision. So Yun's car fell from the bridge into the icy March waters and exploded. The body of the unidentified girl was officially identified as Han So Yun. The funeral was attended by a large crowd. The daughter of a famous restaurateur was popular in social circles. So Yun observed her own funeral from afar, standing among passers-by in black clothing and sunglasses. What struck her most was Jun's genuine grief. He stood by her grave, crying as if burying a piece of his own soul. She saw his shoulders shake, his fists clench and unclench, as he struggled with the urge to fall to his knees right there. At that moment, So Yun realized she had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. She was officially dead, and he was grieving. After the funeral, her father relocated her to another city, providing forged documents under the name Ming Yuna, a name taken from an old novel they had read together when So Yun was a child. There she was to wait while he resolved the family's debt problems. But the problems didn't go away. On the contrary, they multiplied like cancer cells. The Park family was furious at being deceived and demanded the full sum, adding penalties for disrespect. They threatened to kill not only So Yun's father but all distant relatives if the debt was not paid. Han Song-ji sold everything he could, restaurants, property, his late wife's jewelry, but raised only 3 million of the required 5. The remaining 2 million hung over the family like the sword of Damocles. A month ago, her father informed her via an encrypted phone, "They gave me a final extension. 3 months. But they demanded guarantees." "What guarantees?" "I pledged our house and the remaining property. If I don't pay in full by the deadline, they'll take everything. And they'll start looking for you. They know you're alive. One of their men traced me to our meeting place." Since then, So Yun had lived in constant fear. Every day she expected a call with bad news. Every night she woke from nightmares in which men in black suits were breaking down the door of her shabby room above a roadside diner. And now less than a month remained until the final deadline. 26 days, so Yun concluded, watching the rain outside the cafe window. Then they'll come for me. And for you too, if they learn about our connection. Jun Wo remained silent for a long time, processing what he had heard. Finally, he stood and walked slowly across the cafe, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. $2 million, he murmured. I have that kind of money. No. So Yun exclaimed sharply, jumping up. I won't let you risk yourself for me. These people are killers. If they find out you helped us, they'll come for you too. They won't stop until they get everything they want. Jun was stopped and turned to face her. In his eyes burned the fire of determination she had known since their university days, the same gaze he had when he vowed to build the most successful construction company in the country. And what's the alternative? He asked gently, yet insistently. Will you spend your life hiding under a false name? Washing dishes in filthy cafes and trembling at every rustle outside the window? Better that than putting you in danger. He stepped closer and carefully cupped her face in his hands. His touch was so gentle that So Yun felt tears welling up in her eyes again. So Yun, I lost you once. I spent 3 months in hell, thinking you were dead. I won't let that happen again. Never. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm of double life. By day, Jun was still ran his construction empire, holding meetings in glass towers, visiting architects and engineers at construction sites, signing million-dollar contracts. His external life flowed along the familiar path of a successful businessman. But in the evenings, he became a different person. Every day after work he came to the small Spring Breeze Café, now officially his, but still holding the cozy atmosphere of a family-run establishment. So Yun worked there under the name Min Yuna, and Jun Wo watched with pain as the woman who had once managed a prestigious restaurant chain now wiped tables and washed dishes. Her once soft, well-cared-for hands had been hardened by cleaning chemicals. Her hair, once styled by the city's best stylist, was now simply tied back in a practical ponytail. But worst of all was the constant wariness in her eyes. So Yun flinched at every sharp sound, every unfamiliar voice at the door. She had become a hunted prey, and it tore Jun's heart to pieces. You don't have to do all this, he said one evening when they were alone after closing. I can hire staff. You can just be. So Yun lifted her head from the cash register she had counted for the 3rd time. Her face had grown gaunt over the weeks, but her eyes were still beautiful. I need something to do, she said quietly. Otherwise I'll go insane thinking about what will happen in 2 weeks. They slowly grew closer, like 2 wounded animals cautiously approaching one another. At first, it was accidental touches, his hand on her shoulder while helping her reach a high shelf, her fingers brushing his as she served coffee. Then long conversations over empty tables when the last customer left and the rain drummed on the windows. They talked about everything and nothing, books they read while apart, movies they watched alone, the trivialities of daily life. They carefully avoided painful topics, death, lies, lost time. As if trying to rediscover each other, to rebuild the intimacy that had been destroyed by deceit. You know, So Yun said one late evening, sitting by the window watching the few passers-by, every night I dreamed about you. About how we would meet again. But I never imagined it would happen like this. And I went to your grave every day, Jun Wo admitted. I told you about company affairs, new projects, how much I missed you. The cemetery guard already thought I had lost my mind. They sat holding hands across the table, with unspoken words hanging in the air. Both knew their feelings hadn't disappeared, but between them lay a chasm of lies and pain that had to be crossed. Sometimes it feels like all of this is a bad dream, So Yun whispered. And I'll wake up in that shabby little room where I spent the last months, and you'll still think I'm dead. Jun Wo lifted her hand to his lips and gently kissed her palm. This isn't a dream. You're here, with me. And I won't let you disappear again. But what will happen in 2 weeks, when the deadline comes? We'll figure something out. But he had already figured it out. And his plan was far more dangerous than he was willing to admit. The next day, Jun Wo went to the part of the city decent people preferred not to enter even in broad daylight. Narrow alleys between half-ruined buildings, graffiti on the walls, the smell of urine and cheap alcohol, this was a world opposite to gleaming office towers and respectable restaurants. He was looking for a man named Cho Dae-soo, a former detective who had been expelled from the police for corruption and ties to the criminal world. Now Cho made a living selling information, a kind of broker between legitimate and shadow business. Cho lived in a semi-basement apartment in an old high-rise building. He was a man of about 45, with premature gray hair and deep wrinkles cutting across his face. His eyes were the color of old ice, cold and piercing. "Lee Jun Wo," he drawled, opening the door. "A great honor. I've heard much about you, a successful businessman, impeccable reputation, million-dollar contracts. What brings such a distinguished man to my humble abode?" The apartment was sparsely furnished, old furniture, dim lighting, the smell of tobacco and loneliness. On the walls hung photographs from Cho's police career, a young detective with awards and certificates of honor. Now those photos seemed like a cruel joke of fate. "I need information on the Park family," Jun Wo said directly, taking the offered chair. The cynical smile instantly vanished from Cho's face, replaced by wariness. "That's a very dangerous topic, Mr. Lee. And very expensive. These people don't forgive those who meddle in their affairs." Jun Wo placed a thick envelope on the table. $20,000. For complete information on their business, weaknesses, enemies. Everything that could be useful to me. Cho quickly counted the money and hid the envelope in a safe. "The Park family is an empire built on blood and fear," he began, leaning back in his chair. Park Chan-ho, the head of the clan, started as a small-time extortionist in the 70s. Over 40 years, he built a network controlling drug trafficking, prostitution, illegal casinos, and lending. Plus legal businesses, restaurants, karaoke clubs, construction companies. "What can you tell me about the son?" "Park Min-ho. 35, a complete sadist and psychopath. His father fears him. The guy is too unruly and cruel even by their world standards. But Min-ho is ambitious and hungry for power. He's waiting for the old man to die to seize the empire." "And the health of the head of the family?" Cho smirked. "That's the interesting part. Park Chan-ho has liver cancer, terminal stage. Doctors give him at most 6 months. He's trying to hide it, but in certain circles, it's no secret." Jun Wo tensed. This information could prove crucial. And what will happen after his death? A war over the inheritance. Min-ho will be opposed by his uncle, Park Chan-soo, the boss's younger brother. He has more experience and connections, but Min-ho controls the enforcers. A bloody battle is inevitable. Where do they keep their money? The main assets are offshore, but some cash is kept in the underground bank of the Kim family. They're longtime allies and partners. And enemies? Oh, plenty. The main competitors are the Lee gang, any relation? And the Huang clan. Plus new troubles with the police. The head of organized crime, Yoon Suk-ho, doesn't take bribes and is actually trying to bring them down. Jun Wo stood, having obtained the necessary information. "If I want to meet them, how can it be arranged?" "Officially, only through lawyers. But if you need an unofficial meeting." Cho wrote an address on a scrap of paper. "Every Friday the old Park plays poker at the private Golden Chip Club. There's less security there than at his home or office." "Thank you, Mr. Lee," Cho called him at the door. "Wouldn't it be better to stay away from that family? They don't just kill enemies, they eradicate them completely, along with all their relatives." "We'll see," Jun Wo replied tersely. But he already knew there was no turning back. That evening at the café, He didn't tell So-yeon about his plans. Instead, they spoke of the future, carefully, as if afraid to jinx their impossible dreams. When all this is over, So-yeon said, pouring tea into their favorite cups, I want to go somewhere far away. Somewhere no one knows us. Start over. And what do you want to do in this new place? I don't know. Maybe open a small cafe by the sea. Or a bookstore. Something simple and honest. Sounds tempting, Jun Wo smiled. And will there be a place for me there? She looked at him with such tenderness that it took his breath away. You are the place I want to be. He kissed her. For the first time in all these months, their lips met, and the world disappeared. That kiss carried all the pain of separation, all the joy of reunion, all the hope for the future. But tomorrow was Friday. And Jun Wo knew he had to play the most dangerous game of his life. The private Golden Chip Club was located in a mansion in an old aristocratic part of the city. From the outside, the building looked like a regular residential house, old architecture, a well-kept garden, no signs or markers. Only those in the know were aware that millions of dollars in illegal games changed hands behind these walls every night. Jun Wo spent the entire day in his office, trying to focus on routine tasks, but his thoughts kept returning to the upcoming meeting. He knew he was taking a colossal risk, but there was no alternative. The Park family's ultimatum would expire in a week, and then they would start hunting So-yeon. In the evening, he carefully considered his appearance. An expensive but understated suit, Swiss watch, diamond cufflinks, everything had to signal wealth and success. In the world of criminal business, appearance mattered as much as a bank account. At the club entrance, a guard met him, a mountain of muscle in an elegant tuxedo. The security check was thorough and humiliating: metal detector, personal search, document verification. When Jun Wo gave his name and purpose, the guard radioed someone, received permission, and nodded toward the stairs. Inside, the mansion impressed with luxury. Marble staircases, crystal chandeliers, paintings by recognized masters, all of it created the atmosphere of an aristocratic home, if not for the smell of expensive cigars and the sound of shuffling cards from the rooms. The poker room was on the second floor. A spacious room with high ceilings and heavy curtains on the windows. A round table covered in green felt stood in the center, surrounded by 5 men of different ages. Park Chan-ho stood out even among this company. Short, gaunt, with gray hair combed back, he carried himself like a dying emperor. The illness had already left its mark, his skin had an unhealthy yellow hue, movements were slow and cautious. But his eyes remained sharp and merciless. Mr. Lee, he said without looking up from his cards, steadied with a poker face. I've heard of you. Successful entrepreneur, impeccable business reputation, million-dollar projects. What brings such a respected man to our humble establishment? The Han family owes you $2 million, Jun Wo said directly. They do, Park agreed, making a bet and sliding several chips to the center of the table. And? I want to settle that debt. Park slowly raised his head and studied Jun Wo. The other players also noticed, sensing that something significant was happening. Very interesting, Park drawled. And what personal interest do you have in this matter? Han So-yeon was my fiancé. One of the players, a young man with cruel eyes and nervous mannerisms, smirked. Dad, he doesn't know the girl's dead, does he? Park raised his hand, silencing his son. In that gesture, there was absolute authority. Mr. Lee, I'm afraid your beloved tragically died 3 months ago. We even attended the funeral, paying respects to the Han family. Not all the dead lie in graves, Jun Wo replied calmly. A deadly silence fell over the room. Even the sound of breathing seemed deafening. Park slowly set down his cards and leaned back in his chair. Explain yourself. Han So-yeon is alive. Her death was staged to avoid a forced marriage to your son. Park Min-ho jumped up, knocking over his chair. What nonsense is this? I saw her body myself at the morgue. You saw the body of an unidentified girl with falsified documents, Jun Wo said coldly. Han So-yeon has been hiding under a different name for 3 months. The elder Park drummed his fingers thoughtfully on the table. A dangerous gleam appeared in his eyes. Suppose you are telling the truth. Where is she hiding? That I will not reveal until we make a deal. What deal? Jun Wo took a thick envelope from the inner pocket of his jacket and placed it on the table next to the cards and chips. $2 million in cash. Full repayment of the Han family's debt. In return, you leave them alone forever. Park took the envelope but did not open it. Instead, he studied Jun Wo's face, as if trying to read his thoughts. Mr. Lee, you don't understand the principles of our business. It's not just about money. The old man Han deceived us, substituting someone else's body for his daughter. This is a matter of reputation and respect. Then what would satisfy you? The original plan remains in force. Han So-yeon marries my son as agreed. That is impossible. Then any deal is impossible as well. Jun Wo realized negotiations had reached a deadlock. It was time to play the trump card he had saved for a last resort. I have something else, he said, trying to remain calm. Information worth far more than $2 million. And what information is that? Plans by the city administration to redevelop the Hanam-dong district. The expressions of everyone in the room changed instantly. Hanam-dong was the area where the Park family ran their main underground establishments, casinos, brothels, and dens. If the authorities planned a large-scale redevelopment, it meant either colossal losses or the need to buy off half of the city administration. How does a construction contractor have such information? Park asked cautiously. My company is participating in a tender for construction work. I have access to planning documents, lists of buildings scheduled for demolition, work schedules, cost estimates. I know which buildings will be demolished first and which will be renovated. And you are willing to share this information? For a price. Park Chan-ho leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His son fidgeted impatiently, clearly displeased with the course of the negotiations. The other players watched silently, realizing they were witnessing an important event. Very well, the elder Park finally said. We will discuss the details. But first, I need proof that Han So-yeon is really alive. What proof? Obvious. A photograph with today's newspaper in her hands. Or better, let her come here herself. I don't have a camera with me. Park nodded to one of the guards, who handed him a state-of-the-art mobile phone. Call her. Have her come. That's impossible. Then there is no deal, Mr. Lee. Jun Wo realized he had fallen into a carefully laid trap. Park never intended to negotiate, he just wanted to lure So-yeon out of hiding. Very well, he agreed after a long pause. But the conversation must take place only in your presence. No one else in the room. Agreed to that condition. Jun Wo dialed So-yeon's number. The line was answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice sounded anxious. It's me. I need you to come to a specific address. What happened? You sound strange. Everything is under control. Just come to the place I tell you. And bring today's newspaper. He dictated the club's address. There was a long pause on the line. Jun Wo, but this is. I know the location. Come. Trust me. Okay. I'll be there in half an hour. He hung up. Park Chan-ho watched him with the thin smile of a predator who had cornered its prey. Now all that remains is to wait. The 30 minutes passed agonizingly slowly. Jun Wo tried to maintain outward calm, but inside, a storm raged. His heart pounded as if it would burst from his chest. He knew he was leading So-yeon straight into the jaws of predators, but he had no choice. Park Chan-ho ended the poker game, leaving only himself, Jun Wo, and 2 guards at the door in the room. The tension was unbearable. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Lee," Park said, slowly pouring expensive whiskey from a crystal decanter. "How did you manage to build such a successful business at such a young age?" "Through hard work and honest deals," Jun Wo replied. "How noble. I started by stealing cars as a teenager. Then drugs, weapons, people. Do you know the fundamental difference between us? Moral principles?" Park laughed, dryly, without humor. "Honesty with oneself. You consider yourself a respectable man, but you came here to trade secret state information. In essence, it's treason. That makes you as much a criminal as I am. I'm protecting the woman I love. And I'm protecting my family's interests. See? We're not that different." Jun Wo remained silent, but deep down he knew there was truth in Park's words. And that truth hurt. Finally, a cautious knock came at the door. The guard reported, "Boss, a young woman has arrived. She says she was summoned. Let her in." Alone. The door slowly opened, and So-yeon entered. She was pale as a sheet but carried herself with the dignity that months of wandering and humiliation could not break. In her hands, she clutched a fresh newspaper. Park Chan-ho rose from his chair and slowly circled her, like a predator studying its prey before striking. "Han So-yeon," he finally said, satisfaction in his voice. "Risen from the dead. Truly a miraculous resurrection." "Hello, Mr. Park," she said quietly, not raising her eyes. "Do you realize how much trouble your death caused us? My son mourned for 3 months over a fiancée who never existed. He lost weight, slept poorly, refused to eat. I didn't ask him to mourn me," So-yeon replied, her voice unexpectedly firm. Park smirked, slowly returning to his chair. There was a weariness in his movements, the fatigue of a sick man, but his eyes still burned with cold fire. "The character hasn't changed." "Excellent. Now we can discuss our business frankly, without ceremonies or pretenses." He gestured to a chair opposite him. So-yeon sat down, carefully placing the newspaper on the polished table. Jun Wo watched with pain as her hands trembled, though her face remained composed, the result of months of living in constant fear. "The conditions remain the same, as we originally agreed," Park continued in a businesslike tone, as if negotiating a property deal. "You will marry my son Min-ho within a week. Ceremony, banquet, all the usual. Your father's debt will then be automatically forgiven." "And if I refuse?" So-yeon asked, lifting her chin. "Oh, we have various ways of persuasion." Park leaned back in his chair, relishing the moment of absolute power. "We can start with your dear parent. The old man will have a very slow and exquisitely painful death. Then we will deal with Mr. Lee, who so recklessly decided to play the hero. And you will be kept until last, so that you have time to reflect and fully feel it." So-yeon glanced quickly at Jun Wo, and in her eyes he read a storm of emotions, despair, pain, guilt, and a plea for forgiveness. "Fine," she whispered, and that single word sounded like a death sentence. "I agree to your terms." "No." Jun Wo could not contain himself, jumping up. "We agreed entirely differently." "Mr. Lee," Park said calmly, slowly leaning back in his chair, "you truly offered me very interesting things, money and valuable information. Tempting offers, I do not deny. But now that my future bride is here, in this room, I need nothing more. The original plan returns in full force. That's blatant treachery." "Treachery is relative in our world," Park remarked philosophically. "We live in a reality ruled by brute force, not abstract principles of justice." With a barely noticeable gesture, 2 guards stepped toward So-yeon. Jun Wo instinctively lunged toward her, but a 3rd guard blocked his way. "Don't you dare touch her." A massive man with a boxer's broken nose pulled a black pistol from under his jacket and calmly aimed it at Jun Wo's chest. "Sit back down and behave, unless you want your brains to decorate the walls of this lovely room." Jun Wo slowly lowered himself into his chair, realizing he had walked into a masterfully set trap. Park never intended to negotiate honestly, he only used him as live bait to lure So-Yun out of hiding. "Forgive me," So-Yun whispered as the guards approached. Tears ran down her pale cheeks. "I should never have let you risk yourself for me." "We haven't lost completely yet," Jun Wo said, though deep down he began to doubt there was a way out of this situation. Park burst into a hoarse laugh, a sound painful, like the cough of a dying man. "Mr. Lee, the game is over. You have lost spectacularly, beautifully, and dramatically." But the old crime boss was wrong. Jun Wo had indeed lost this particular hand, but he had one final decisive move, the very one he had deemed unnecessary to tell either So-Yun or Park about. Before visiting the club, he had secretly met with Yun Sak-ho, the head of organized crime enforcement. This principled man had been unsuccessfully trying for over 2 years to find a way to bring down the Park family, but law enforcement lacked direct evidence and willing witnesses. Jun Wo proposed a mutually beneficial deal. He would provide the police with all secret documents on the city's redevelopment plans and agree to serve as a key witness, while authorities would organize a large-scale operation to capture the entire gang red-handed. The operation was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the evening. Less than 8 minutes remained until the assault began. Jun Wo glanced at his expensive Swiss watch and allowed himself a faint smile. "Mr. Park, are you completely certain tonight will be your lucky evening?" "Absolutely, without a doubt, Mr. Lee." "Then tell me, why is your mobile phone stubbornly silent?" Park frowned, clearly not understanding where this strange conversation was leading. "Very simple. All your invaluable sources in the city police were arrested exactly 2 hours ago. And your closest business partners are at this very moment giving detailed testimony to the prosecutors." As if to confirm his words, the increasing roar of car engines and the slamming of doors could be heard outside the building. The sounds multiplied, approaching the club. Park leapt to his feet, his face contorted with sudden rage and the clear realization of what had happened. "Son of a bitch! You've set us all up. I merely protected the woman I love more than my own life. And at the same time, I helped law enforcement capture dangerous criminals." One of the guards ran to a tall window and cautiously peeked onto the dark street. "Boss, the building is completely surrounded. SWAT vehicles, armed men in black uniforms, spotlights." Park clutched his left side, a deadly combination of stress and advancing illness making itself felt. His breathing became labored and hoarse. "Bastard!" He rasped through the pain. "You have destroyed the work of my entire life. You destroyed your own life many years ago when you consciously chose the criminal path." A series of powerful blows rattled the massive door, and a voice from an electronic megaphone cut through the night. "This is the police. The building is completely surrounded. Exit immediately with your hands up." Park's hands trembled with fury as he yanked a heavy pistol from the desk drawer. His eyes blazed with the feverish gleam of a cornered predator. "If I go down, I will drag her to the grave with me." He slowly raised the black barrel, aiming at So-Yun as she sat there. Jun Wo sprang forward in a flash, shielding her completely with his body. A shot rang out. The bullet whistled just inches from Jun Wo's head and shattered the antique Venetian mirror on the opposite wall. The old boss's advancing illness and nervous strain seriously affected his aim. At that moment, a powerful police battering ram crashed through the heavy door, and a SWAT team stormed into the spacious room, a dozen professional operatives in black tactical gear, body armor, and helmets, rifles at the ready. "Drop your weapons immediately. Hands on your head. Lie face down." In desperation, Park tried to fire again, but a sniper from the assault team was faster and infinitely more precise. His bullet knocked the gun from the trembling hands of the old man, shattering several of his fingers in the process. Park collapsed onto the expensive Persian rug, writhing in sharp pain and impotent rage. The remaining guards surrendered immediately, without a trace of resistance, experienced professionals who understood when the game was irretrievably lost. Mr. Lee, Miss Han, the SWAT team commander addressed them politely, removing his protective mask to reveal a sweaty, determined face. "Are you both unharmed?" "We're fine," Jun Wo replied, holding the still shaking So-Yun protectively. "Thank you for your professionalism and precision. In that case, please come with us to the station to provide detailed statements. The process will take several hours, but it's necessary for the investigation." The next 8 painstaking hours were spent in a spacious office of the investigative department, as Jun Wo and So-Yun recounted everything they knew about the criminal activities of the Park family, from their elaborate usury schemes to direct threats of physical violence and psychological intimidation. Their testimony became the cornerstone of a criminal case that law enforcement had been meticulously building for more than 2 years. Operational reports later revealed the true scale of the night's operation. Coordinated arrests took place across the city, active members of the criminal network were detained, weapons and drug caches seized, and illegal casinos and brothels shut down. In a single night, a criminal empire that had been meticulously built over decades collapsed like a house of cards. Park Chan-ho and his psychopathic son will receive life imprisonment without any possibility of parole, announced lead investigator Yoon Sak-ho early in the morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the barred windows. The remaining active members of the organized crime network will receive sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. This family will never threaten anyone again. What will happen to my father's multimillion-dollar debts? So-Yun asked anxiously, looking exhausted after the sleepless night but with a spark of hope finally in her eyes. All debts owed to this criminal organization are officially invalidated by a special decision of the city court, explained the investigator. Our state does not recognize any legal claims by criminal creditors. It was the best and most long-awaited news in months. For the first time in an endlessly long time, So-Yun smiled, not forced, not tense, but sincerely, with all her heart. They left the grim police station under the first gentle rays of the autumn sun. The October morning greeted them with cool freshness and purity. The air smelled of recent rain and wet fallen leaves. The vast city slowly woke around them, continuing its ordinary life, unaware of the invisible drama that had unfolded in its dark alleys the previous night. "What happens now?" So-Yun asked softly, holding Jun Wo's warm hand tightly. "Now we finally live," he replied, carefully lifting her hand to his lips and gently kissing her delicate fingers. "Truly live, without constant fear, lies, or pretenses." The next day they went to So-Yun's father. Han Song-ji had aged 10 years in those 3 nightmare months, noticeably thinner, prematurely gray, his eyes dulled by continuous stress and guilt. When he unexpectedly saw his living daughter on his doorstep, he could not believe his eyes for several seconds. "So-Yun? Is it really you, my girl?" "Yes, Dad. It's me. Alive, healthy, and free." The stern businessman cried like a small child, embracing his daughter tightly and endlessly repeating through tears, "Forgive me, please. Forgive me for everything terrible you endured because of me. I was a coward and selfish." "Dad, it's all behind us now," So-Yun gently soothed him, running her hand through his gray hair. "The most important thing is that we are all alive and can start a completely new life." Official documentation and the restoration of her identity took several exhausting weeks. Legally, So-Yun had still been considered dead, and her symbolic resurrection required numerous medical certificates, witness statements, expert opinions, and court decisions. Ultimately, all bureaucratic hurdles were successfully overcome. Their small family café, Spring Breeze, gradually became a living symbol of their renewed life. They fully renovated the cozy establishment, expanded the dining area, completely revamped the menu, purchased modern equipment, and hired a team of professional chefs and experienced servers. Within 6 months, the once modest cafe transformed into one of the most popular and frequented spots in the district. "Remember, You once dreamed of creating a network of restaurants across the country? So Yun said one late evening, proudly watching a dining room full of satisfied and happy customers. Of course I remember those plans. What do you want to say? I think it's time to turn our boldest dreams into tangible reality. Over the next 2 intense but incredibly productive years, they opened 8 more establishments in various city districts and suburbs. Each cafe had its own unique style and atmosphere, but all shared a common philosophy of homey warmth, comfort, and exceptional quality food. The family business thrived, bringing not only stable profits but also profound moral satisfaction from creating something truly meaningful and valuable to people. Their love grew and strengthened with each passing day. The harsh trials they endured did not destroy them, they only solidified and tempered their bond. They learned to genuinely cherish every day together, every conversation, every gentle touch, every gaze. The wedding ceremony took place the following autumn, precisely on the anniversary of their dramatic reunion in that same cafe. The celebration was held in a small historic temple on the city outskirts, attended by close family and loyal friends. So Yun was divine in a simple, elegant white dress, and Jun Wo could not hold back tears of boundless happiness as he recited his vows at the altar. I solemnly promise to love you in joy and sorrow, in wealth and poverty, in health and sickness, he said, never breaking eye contact with her radiant eyes. I promise never to lose you again. And I vow to always be completely honest with you, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. No secrets, no lies between us. Only pure truth and sincere love. Their first wedding night, by mutual agreement, was spent in the very cafe where fate had brought them together for the second time. They sat at the same table, slowly sipping champagne, reminiscing with tenderness about the long and arduous journey that had ultimately led them to this magical moment. You know what I think? So Yun said, gazing thoughtfully out the window at the quiet night street. Sometimes it feels like that terrible accident was absolutely inevitable. As if fate itself wanted to cruelly separate us, only to bring us back together forever and stronger than before. Perhaps there is some meaning in that, Jun Wo replied slowly. But I don't really believe in the concept of blind and merciless fate. I am convinced that we create our own lives, through conscious decisions, actions, and choices. Then tell me, what kind of life will we create next? A happy and long one. Full of sincere love, mutual respect, and absolute honesty with each other. 7 years later, a soft autumn rain tapped rhythmically against the wide windows of the spacious country house, where the large and happy Lee family now lived. Jun was sat in his cozy study, carefully reviewing the monthly financial reports of the flourishing Spring Breeze Cafe chain, which had grown over the years to an impressive 25 locations scattered across the country. The business brought in steady millions, but the greatest and most priceless achievement in his life was neither money nor fame. In the large living room, their children played carefreely, their serious 5-year-old son, Min Jun, and their mischievous 3-year-old daughter, Hai Yun. The boy was a remarkable copy of his father, thoughtful, determined, with innate leadership qualities. The little girl had inherited all of her mother's beauty and lively character, the same expressive brown eyes, charming smile, and stubborn, independent spirit. So Yun bustled in the spacious kitchen, preparing the family dinner and softly humming an old romantic song they had listened to during their student years. 7 years of happy marriage had not weakened their love. Instead, every day brought new reasons for genuine gratitude to the generous hand of fate. So Yun's father, Han Song-ji, had fully recovered both mentally and physically. He now actively assisted the young couple in managing the expanded family business and adored his grandchildren, spending every free minute with them, telling enchanting stories, playing educational games, and teaching life's wisdom. Every year, on the sad anniversary of her official death, So Yun faithfully visited the city cemetery to pay respects at the modest grave of the unknown girl who had unwittingly saved her life by her tragic death. She always brought fresh flowers and stood in silent gratitude, mentally thanking the stranger for her unintended sacrifice. "Mom, why do we visit this grave every year?" asked curious Min Jun one day, when he turned 5. To always remember, son, that every human life is precious and unique, so Yun patiently explained. And that sometimes the death of one person can inadvertently save others. What is death, Mom? It's when someone leaves our world forever, little one. But the bright memory of them lives on in the hearts of those who truly loved them. Jun Wo stood beside them, holding little Yun in his arms. The girl listened with childlike curiosity to the serious conversation, though she didn't yet fully understand all the words. Daddy, did you ever really think Mom was gone forever? She asked in her clear, childlike voice. Yes, my joy. For 3 whole months, I was absolutely sure I had lost her forever. And were you very, very sad? Unbearably sad, little one. That was the darkest and hardest time of my life. And now are you happy, Daddy? Jun Wo cast a loving gaze at his wife, the children, and the humble grave of the unknown girl, whose tragic fate had made all this family happiness possible. Now I am the happiest man in the whole wide world, my dear. This was an extraordinary story of love that triumphed over death, lies, and human cruelty. A story of how sometimes one must pass through true hell to fully understand and appreciate the value of paradise. A story that even in the darkest and most hopeless circumstances, a path to bright light can always be found if there is that one person worth fighting for to the very end. Every blessed evening, when Jun Wo and So Yun lay down to sleep in their cozy family home, they thanked merciful fate from the bottom of their hearts for the priceless second chance it had generously given them. For the fact that their strong love not only survived the harsh trials but grew even deeper and stronger. For the fact that they had finally learned to genuinely cherish every single day spent together as a priceless gift from heaven. In the quiet of the autumn night, as the children slept peacefully in their beds and the rain whispered softly outside, Jun Wo and So Yun lay in each other's arms, knowing one simple truth: their love had endured the ultimate test and emerged victorious. They would never lie to each other again. Never hide the truth, however bitter it might be. Because they had learned that only absolute honesty can provide a reliable foundation for true happiness. And as So Yun fell asleep on her beloved's shoulder, and he gently stroked her silky hair, they both understood their love story was only beginning. Years of shared life, new joys and challenges, the children growing up, and perhaps new additions to the family awaited them. But now they knew for certain, whatever fate brought them, they would face it together. Hand in hand, heart to heart, soul to soul. Forever.